midnight train. The clock slowly ticked towards midnight as Clara stood alone on the empty train platform. The last train was supposed to come any moment, but there was no one else around. She shivered and pulled her coat tighter, feeling a strange sense of worry grow in her chest. She looked up at the old clock. Time seemed to move too slowly. Thick fog covered the platform, even slipping through the cracks of the wooden bench where she sat. The station's lights flickered now and then, making long, spooky shadows. Suddenly, she heard a distant noise. The train, Clara thought with relief. But as it got closer, something didn't feel right. The sound was too quiet, too far away. When the train finally arrived, its windows were dark, and the screeching of its brakes made her shiver. The doors opened with a soft hiss, showing an empty, dimly lit train. Even though she felt scared, Clara stepped inside, feeling the cold metal floor under her shoes. She sat near the middle, facing the doors, her heart beating fast. The train started to move. There was no conductor, no other passengers, just Clara and the soft hum of the train's engine. She looked out the window, but the fog was so thick that she could barely see anything. After a few minutes, the lights inside the train began to flicker. Clara felt her heart skip a beat. She stood up, her pulse racing, and walked toward the door, trying to see into the next carriage. Was she really alone? The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, a man was standing at the far end of the carriage. He was tall, wearing a long dark coat, but his face was hidden in shadows. Clara froze. He hadn't been there when she got on the train. Her mind raced. Should she run? But the train was moving too fast, and she was far from the next stop. The man didn't move. He just stood there, watching her. The lights flickered again. This time, he was closer. Clara's heart was pounding so loudly, she could barely hear the train. She took a step back and looked at the emergency brake. Should she pull it? Or would that trap her inside with the man? The lights flickered once more. Now, the man was just a few feet away. His face was still hidden, but Clara could feel his cold eyes staring at her. She reached for the emergency brake, her hands shaking. Suddenly, the train screeched to a stop. The man was gone, as if he had never been there. The doors opened, showing a station lit by moonlight, but something was wrong. This wasn't her stop. Clara stepped off the train, her legs shaking. The station was completely silent. Its walls were broken, like it had been abandoned for many years. A sign above the entrance swung slightly. "Welcome to Midnight Crossing." Clara had never heard of this place. She turned back to the train, but the doors were already closed. The train began to move again, leaving her behind. Panic filled her chest. She looked around, hoping to find someone, but the only thing she saw was the thick fog. Then, from the shadows, a voice softly whispered her name. The Midnight Train, Part 2. Clara's heart stopped. She spun around, eyes wide, but saw nothing but the thick fog swirling in the dim light. The voice had been unmistakable. It had whispered her name with such chilling familiarity that she felt as though it had been following her for years. "Clara," the voice came again, softer, almost teasing, like a predator playing with its prey. She backed away, trying to keep her breathing steady. Her legs felt heavy, as if the weight of fear was pressing down on them. She had to get out of there, but where would she go? There were no signs, no exits, no other people. The old station seemed to breathe around her, the air thickening with each passing moment. Clara turned to where the voice had last come from and called out shakily, "Who's there?" Silence. For a moment, she thought maybe she had imagined it all. Maybe the darkness and the loneliness of the strange station were playing tricks on her mind. But then, from the shadows, a figure slowly emerged. It wasn't the man from the train. It was her exact reflection, stepping out of the darkness, wearing the same coat, the same shoes, and even mimicking the same horrified expression on her face. Clara stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. The other Clara, her twin, her mirror image, stood eerily still, watching her with cold, lifeless eyes. "What do you want?" Clara gasped, her voice barely audible. The figure smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Clara's skin crawl, as though this thing knew something she didn't, something terrible. "You've been running, Clara," it said, its voice smooth and echoing like a distant melody. "And now, you've finally reached the end." Clara shook her head, backing up until her body hit the old stone wall of the station. "I don't understand understand. What is this place? What do you mean? The figure took a step forward, the smile widening. Midnight Crossing. You know what it is. You just don't remember. Clara's mind reeled. Flashes of forgotten memories started surfacing. Her childhood home, long nights of insomnia, the feeling of always being followed, watched, haunted. She'd brushed it off for years, told herself it was just paranoia. But now, standing in front of her own doppelganger, it all came rushing back. This wasn't just a station. This was a place she had visited before, somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, between life and death. No, Clara whispered, her legs trembling. This can't be real. It's a dream. I'll wake up. Her mirror image tilted its head, amused. That's what you always say? But you never wake up, Clara. Not from this. Clara's head spun as the fog around her thickened. She needed to move, to run, but her feet felt like they were stuck in quicksand. Her twins stepped closer, their faces nearly inches apart now. The air felt like ice, and Clara could see her breath in the cold. Why are you doing this? Clara managed to ask, though her voice was barely a whisper. The figure raised a hand, placing it gently on Clara's shoulder. The touch was so cold it burned. Because, Clara, it whispered, its voice soft but menacing, you were never supposed to leave. You escaped once, but no one leaves Midnight Crossing forever. With that, the world around Clara seemed to warp. The walls of the station twisted, and the platform stretched out endlessly into the fog. The figure before her began to dissolve, melting into the mist like smoke, but its voice lingered, echoing in her ears. It's time to come home. Clara's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the platform, darkness closing in around her. Her vision blurred, and just before the world faded completely, she heard the sound of the train returning, the same hollow rumble, the same hiss of its brakes. Only this time, she knew she wasn't going to board it, because she had never truly left. When the clock struck midnight, the train pulled into the station again. Its empty carriages opened their doors, waiting for the next soul to arrive, but this time, no one was left to board.